Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
There is a particular kind of cruelty that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with raised voices or slammed doors. It comes quietly over years, dressed in the language of concern. It sounds like a mother saying, "We just worry about you," while her eyes say you are less than. It sounds like a father nodding slowly at your sister's promotion while glancing at his watch when you speak. It accumulates the way water fills a basement, silently, invisibly, until one day you walk downstairs and realize you are already standing in it. My name is Maya Reeves. I am 31 years old. I have a corner office on the 14th floor of a building I helped finance, a team of 22 people who depend on me, and a bank account that would make most people need to sit down. I also have a family that, for most of my adult life, genuinely believed I was doing nothing with mine. That was not an accident. That was a choice I made carefully, deliberately, for reasons I will get to. But first, you need to understand the Thanksgiving table. Every year, my parents hosted Thanksgiving at the house on Birchwood Drive, the 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb that was nice enough to feel comfortable and expensive enough for my mother to mention the square footage in casual conversation. There were always 12 people at that table. My parents, my older sister Diane and her husband Derek, Diane's 2 daughters, my uncle James and his wife Linda, 2 cousins who followed whatever direction the family pointed them, and me. The 12th seat changed sometimes. A neighbor, a family friend, but the dynamic never did. Diane was the golden child. Had been since we were teenagers. She had the right job, senior marketing director at a firm downtown, the right husband, the right house in the right zip code, and most importantly, she had my parents' approval in the way that functions like oxygen in some families. Invisible when it's there, impossible to survive without. I was the other one. The younger one who had potential but hadn't figured it out yet. The one who worked in finance but never quite explained what that meant. The one who drove a modest car and wore sensible clothes and smiled when people made comments about her life and said nothing that required defending. What no one at that table knew was that I had been quietly paying for most of it. The house on Birchwood Drive? My parents had refinanced it in 2018 during a financial rough patch. My father's contracting business had 2 bad quarters back to back, and the balloon payment came due at exactly the wrong moment. They had been 3 months from foreclosure when a wire transfer of $47,000 hit their account from a consulting LLC called Reeves Strategic Holdings. My father had assumed it was an error and called the bank. The bank confirmed it was a legitimate transfer and suggested he keep it. He did. He never asked where it came from. He never said thank you. That was where I started. Over the next 5 years I kept going. Their mortgage, $2,500 per month, covered by automatic transfer. Their utility bills, routed through an account management service I set up. My mother's car note, $680 per month, handled the same way. 3 separate medical bills that would have wiped out their savings. A home repair after a tree came through the back fence during a storm. Diane's daughter's summer camp fees one year when Diane mentioned at Easter that they might have to skip it. I kept records of all of it. Not because I planned to use them. Because I am someone who keeps records. It is what I do for a living, in a manner of speaking. I manage capital, I track cash flows, I document everything. I do not make decisions based on feelings. I make them based on evidence. At the time I told myself I was helping because I could. Because family is family. Because no matter how many times my mother compared me to Diane at dinner, she was still my mother, and watching your parents spiral toward bankruptcy is not something you can simply let happen. What I did not yet fully understand was that my help had become invisible, not just to them but to the story my family told about me. I graduated from college with a finance degree and a job offer from a mid-sized investment firm in the city. I worked there for 4 years, learned everything I could, kept my head down and saved aggressively. By 26, I had built enough of a cushion to start moving into private consulting, advising small businesses and family offices on capital structure, cash management, and growth strategy. Within 2 years, Reeves Strategic Holdings had 12 active clients. Within 3, it had 27 and a staff of 4. By the time I was 30, we were managing approximately $140 million in assets under advisory, had closed 2 significant real estate syndication deals, and had been quietly retained by a regional bank to assist with a loan portfolio restructure worth close to $800 million in underlying assets. I did not tell my family any of this. Part of that was practical. I knew what would happen if I did. Diane would pivot immediately, suddenly wanting to collaborate, suddenly finding reasons to visit more often, suddenly discovering that her marketing experience was perfectly complementary to financial consulting. My mother would start telling everyone. My father would ask if I could look at his business finances and then ask again, and then it would become an expectation and then an obligation, and eventually a resentment when I set limits on how much unpaid advising I was willing to do for a family business that had never once asked me how I was doing. And part of it, if I am being honest, was something simpler and sadder than strategy. I wanted to see. I needed to know whether they would ever look at me. Just me, no portfolio, no client list, no number large enough to command their respect, and find something worth seeing. I needed to know whether my mother was capable of being proud of me simply because I was her daughter. I watched for 5 years. The answer I collected was consistent. There were small moments along the way that I catalogued without meaning to. The Christmas when my father gave Diane a check for $5,000 to help with the new house, and handed me a gift card to a bookstore worth $50. The birthday dinner when my mother went around the table asking everyone about their 5-year plans and skipped me entirely, not maliciously, just automatically, the way you skip a blank line in a document. The family group chat where Diane's promotions and Derek's golf weekends and the girls' school performances were celebrated with strings of emojis, and where my messages were read and not responded to, or responded to hours later with a single word. I'm not telling you these things to build a case. I am telling you because patterns matter. Because a single incident can be explained away, but 63 wire transfers and a consistent, decade-long pattern of being treated as peripheral in your own family cannot be reframed as misunderstanding. The breakthrough moment came not during a dramatic confrontation, but during a quiet Tuesday dinner 2 years before the Thanksgiving that changed everything. My mother had called me to the house to help her figure out a discrepancy in her household budget. I sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours sorting through her bank statements, organizing her bills, and identifying 3 recurring charges she had forgotten about. I saved her approximately $380 per month in unnecessary expenses. When I left, she walked me to the door and said, "You've always been good with small things like this." I drove home in silence. I thought about the $2,500 that had left my account 4 days earlier, on the first of the month as it did every month. I thought about the $47,000 that had saved this house from foreclosure. I thought about the fact that she did not know and about whether, if she did know anything about her expression in that doorway, would be different. I started keeping a separate folder. The Thanksgiving before the one that mattered, Diane announced at the table that she and Derek were buying a vacation property in the mountains. Everyone celebrated. My mother cried with happiness. My father ordered an extra bottle of wine. I smiled and passed the rolls. 3 weeks later, my mother called me to ask if I could lend them $8,000 to help cover an unexpected car repair and a medical bill that had arrived at the same time. She did not use the word lend the way most people do, as a word that implies repayment. She used it the way our family always did, as a softer word for give, with the understanding that the transaction would be forgotten by everyone except me. I transferred the money. I added it to the folder. The call that finally changed my approach came from a number I didn't recognize on a Saturday morning in March. It was a woman named Patricia Holloway, identifying herself as a fraud investigator at Meridian Federal Bank. She had been reviewing a credit application that had been submitted in my name for a home equity line of credit worth $142,000. The application had been submitted 11 months earlier. The address on the application was my parents' house. I sat very still for a long moment. "I didn't submit that application," I told her. There was a pause. "I suspected as much," she said. "The signature is inconsistent with the others we have on file for you, and the stated income doesn't match your tax history. We've flagged it as potentially fraudulent. I wanted to call you directly before we escalate." I asked her to send me everything she had. The documents arrived 2 days later. The application had been submitted by someone using my social security number, my date of birth, my former address. It had been denied. My credit profile was clean enough that the inconsistencies stood out, but the attempt had been made. The attempt had been made, and the address on the application was a house I had been paying the mortgage on for 4 years. I called my attorney. Her name is Renata Osei. She is brilliant, methodical, and entirely without sentimentality about situations like the one I described to her. She listened without interrupting and then said quietly, Maya, how long have you been supporting them? 5 years, I said. And do they know? No. There was a pause. Then I think, Renata said carefully, that it is time for them to know. All of it. At once. I thought about that for a week. I thought about what I was willing to say and what I was willing to show and what I wanted the outcome to be. I was not interested in revenge. I want to be clear about that because I think people assume a story like this is about revenge, about making someone suffer the way they made you suffer. It isn't. Or it wasn't for me. What I wanted was simpler and harder than revenge. I wanted them to see me. Actually see me. Before I walked away, I told Renata to prepare the documentation. I told her I wanted everything. 5 years of transfers, the fraud report, the credit application, the full accounting. I told her I wanted it organized cleanly, clearly, in a format that could be read and understood at a dinner table. Renata worked on it for 2 weeks. She is the kind of attorney who treats precision as a form of respect. For the client, for the process, for the truth. She organized the wire transfer records chronologically, cross-referenced them against my parents' mortgage servicer statements to confirm receipt, and produced a clean summary table that condensed 63 transactions into a single readable page. She included the fraud investigation documents in the order she recommended I deploy them, starting with the support record, moving to the fraud report, ending with the credit application. He told me the sequencing mattered. Let them absorb the generosity first, she said. Then show them what happened alongside it. I also told my closest colleague Marcus what I was planning. Marcus had been with me since year 2 of the firm. He had met my family once at a work event where my mother had introduced herself to 3 of my clients before introducing herself to him, then asked him if he was one of Maya's assistants. He had handled it with more grace than I probably would have. He listened to my plan and said, "Do you need me there?" I told him no. He said, "Call me after." He meant it. The week before Thanksgiving, I also stopped the mortgage transfer for the first time in 60 months. Not as a punishment. The decision hadn't been made yet. But because I needed my parents to be in the same financial reality they would have been in without me, at least briefly, so that what I was about to show them would land with its actual weight. The transfer had always been anonymous. They would not know it was missing until the servicer's notice arrived. I told her I would use Thanksgiving. The table was set the way it always was. The good china, the cloth napkins, the centerpiece my mother refreshed every year with new seasonal flowers. There were 11 people seated when I arrived. I was the last to get there, which was intentional. I set a manila folder on the empty chair beside me and said nothing about it. Dinner moved through its usual rhythms. Diane talked about the mountain property. Derek talked about a promotion that had expanded his team. My father talked about a new subcontractor he'd hired who was, finally, someone worth keeping around. My mother moved between the kitchen and the table, topping off glasses, adjusting dishes, performing the version of warmth she was most comfortable with. Physical hospitality in place of emotional presence. I ate. I listened. I said almost nothing, which was also nothing new. The shift came over dessert. My mother sat down fully for the first time and let out the long exhale that meant she was ready to stop moving and start talking. Aunt Linda, who had always been my mother's most reliable chorus, settled into her chair and reached for her coffee. Derek made a comment about the economy that no one fully engaged with. And then, in the way these things happen, a small silence fell over the table and my mother looked at me. "Maya," she said with the tone she used when she wanted the conversation to serve a purpose. "Your father and I have been talking. We're worried about you." I set down my fork. "You've been so quiet lately. And you still haven't. I mean, we don't even really know what you're doing. With work, with your life." She glanced at Diane. "Diane just closed a major account. He's doing so well. And we're proud of her. We're proud of both of you, obviously. But you never seem to have any good news to share, and we wonder sometimes if you're struggling." Aunt Linda nodded. "It's just concern, sweetheart." My mother's voice took on the particular texture it got when she was working towards something emotional. I look at this family and I see how hard everyone works and how much everyone contributes, and sometimes I think, I don't know. I wonder if you've ever really understood what it means to be part of something. To help. To give back." She pressed her lips together. "You have never helped this family. Not once. We struggle and you do nothing. You watch." The table was quiet. Diane looked at her plate. Derek examined his dessert. My cousins stared at the tablecloth. My father said nothing. But he didn't correct her. I sat with it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I reached to my right, picked up the manila folder and placed it on the table in front of me. I opened it slowly, removed the top page and set it flat where my mother could see it. 63 wire transfers, I said. Your mortgage, utilities and car note. $340,000 over 5 years, Mom. No one moved. The page showed a clean summary table. Dates in the left column, amounts in the center, recipient accounts on the right. My attorney had prepared it to be readable at a glance. I had not highlighted anything or added annotations. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke clearly enough. That's not, my mother started. Page 2, I said. I set down the second page. It was an itemized breakdown. $150,000 in mortgage payments. $48,000 in utilities over 60 months. The car note total. The 3 medical bills. The emergency home repair. The camp fees. Diane's face had changed. She was looking at the pages with the particular expression of someone who is doing math in their head and arriving at a number they don't want to accept. Page 3, I said, is the fraud report. The table went completely silent. I set down the third page. Patricia Holloway's initial notification letter, followed by the first 2 pages of the fraud investigation summary from Meridian Federal Bank. The credit application in my name. The address listed. The signature that wasn't mine. My father's coffee cup came down on the table harder than he intended. Someone submitted a home equity application in my name, I said, looking at my mother. For $142,000. Using my social security number. From this address. I paused. It was denied. But it was submitted. My mother's mouth opened. No sound came out. I am not here to file charges tonight, I said. Kept my voice level. I had practiced this, not the words exactly but the register. Calm, factual, without heat. My attorney has the full documentation. What happens next depends entirely on decisions that haven't been made yet. I looked around the table. At Aunt Linda, who had stopped nodding. At my cousins, who were staring at their plates. At Diane, whose expression had moved from shock into something more complicated. Something that looked for the first time like recognition. I wanted you to know the truth. All of it. Before anything else. I closed the folder. My mother said very quietly, Paya. I'm not finished, I said. I had one more page. My business card from Reeves Strategic Holdings was paperclipped to the inside back cover of the folder. I removed it and set it on the table between my mother and father. It was a simple card, cream stock navy text, my name and title. Maya Reeves, Managing Director, Reeves Strategic Holdings. The LLC that has been sending you wire transfers for 5 years is mine, I said. Reeves Strategic Holdings manages approximately $140 million in advisory assets. We closed $800 million in bank restructuring work this year. I'm not struggling. I have never been struggling. I chose not to tell you because I wanted to understand what this family looked like when it thought I had nothing to offer. Diane made a sound that was not quite a word. How I know, I said. My father stood up. He opened his mouth and then closed it again. He sat back down. Aunt Linda said slowly, Paya, we had no idea. I know, I said. That was the point. My mother was crying. Not the performance of emotion she sometimes deployed at the table, but something real and uncontrolled. Tears moving down her face without any apparent effort to stop them. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know it was you. I never would have said. You said it, I told her gently. You have been saying it in different ways for years. The transfers were anonymous because I needed to know whether the love was conditional on the amount. And now I do. There was nothing cruel in how I said it. I want to be clear about that. I was not trying to wound her. I was simply telling her the truth, and sometimes the truth arrives without padding. I looked at Diane. The application in my name, I don't know who submitted it. My attorney doesn't know yet. But someone at this address did. I let that sit. I hope it wasn't you. I genuinely hope that. Diane looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at Derek. Something passed between them. Fast, private, the kind of communication that happens in marriages when something has been known but not spoken. Derek pushed his chair back from the table. I did not wait to see where that went. I picked up the folder. I stood up. I kissed my mother on the top of her head. I don't know exactly why I did that. It felt like the right thing to do, like a punctuation mark on something that was ending, and I walked to the front door. My father followed me into the hallway. He looked older than I had seen him look before, like the evening had taken something from him that he hadn't prepared to give. Maya, he said. I'm sorry. I looked at him for a moment. I know, Dad, I said. I didn't know how much you were carrying. I know. Is there a way to? I don't know yet, I said honestly. That's a conversation for another time. Tonight I just needed you to know. I left. I drove home in silence. I was not sad. I was not triumphant. I was something closer to empty. The particular lightness that comes when you have been carrying something for a long time and you finally set it down. 3 weeks later, Renata called me with an update on the fraud investigation. Derek had submitted the application. Not Diane. Derek, who had apparently seen a piece of mail at the house 2 years earlier that included enough of my financial information to attempt the application. He had done it without telling Diane. The investigation was ongoing. He had retained a defense attorney. Diane called me the same afternoon Renata called me. She was crying in a way that was different from how she cried at the Thanksgiving table. Stripped of any performance, raw in a way I had not heard from her before. She said she hadn't known. She said she was sorry for years of things that didn't have to do with Derek at all. She said she had always known, somewhere underneath everything, that she had treated me like a supporting character in a story that was supposed to be about her. I listened. I did not rush to reassure her. I told her I appreciated her saying it. I told her I would need time. The mortgage on the Birchwood house went into a 60-day forbearance after I stopped the automatic transfers. My parents had not been aware the transfers were happening, so they had no money set aside to cover the payments independently. They are currently working with a housing counselor and have applied to refinance with a modified loan. They will likely need to downsize. My father told me this over the phone with a steadiness I respected. No blame, no request. Just information. I told him I would not be resuming the transfers. I told him I was willing to help him think through their options from an advisory standpoint if he wanted. He said he would think about it. As for me, my life looks the same from the outside as it did the day before Thanksgiving. Same office. Same team. Same modest apartment that I chose because I like it, not because I can't afford anything better. The difference is that I no longer carry a version of my family's financial survival in my chest alongside my own. There is a woman on my team, her name is Priya and she has been with me for 3 years, who asked me once why I seemed so calm in difficult client situations. I told her that I had spent a long time in environments where I had to make peace with being unseen, and that it had taught me something useful. You do not need anyone's permission to know your own value. She wrote that down. I noticed. If you are the one in your family who gives and receives nothing back but the implication that you are not giving enough, I want you to hear this. The problem is not that they don't know. Often they do know in some part of themselves that they have decided not to examine. The problem is that as long as the giving continues without acknowledgement, the story they tell about you can continue unchanged. You can be the failure and the foundation at the same time as long as no one turns the lights on. Turn the lights on. Not for revenge. Not to burn something down. But because you are allowed to be seen accurately. You are allowed to set down what you have been carrying and let the people who handed you the weight figure out how to stand up without it. Some of them will surprise you. Some will not. My mother called last week. She asked if we could have coffee. I said yes. We have not had coffee yet. I am not rushing toward it or away from it. I am moving at the speed that feels honest. That is, I have decided enough.